Till now, we have created models, seeds, but how do you know if these DBT models they are actually correct? What if there are null values that are creeping in, or there are duplicate records which are actually silently breaking your dashboards? That is where DBT tests come in. In this video, we will deep dive into DBT tests, what they are, why they matter, how to implement them properly in a production grade DBT project. By the end, you will be able to write your own DBT tests and ensure that your data models they are reliable as well as trustworthy. If you're new here, then I am Radhika and this is my YouTube channel Datazard. I am creating this DBT series so that I can explain to you the different components that are involved in a DBT project. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, then I would really appreciate you subscribing and liking the videos if you find these helpful. And now without further ado, let's get started. Now the first question that I would like to address is, why do we need DBT tests? Let us take a real life example. When you're cooking rice, let's say, all you're doing is you're putting water, rice and salt and you're letting it cook. Now before serving to your guest, what do? You taste it, right? Why? Because it could be that the salt is less or the rice are overcooked, undercooked, whatever. So you want to taste it before you serve it to your guests. Similarly in DBT, you are serving model 2 to your stakeholders. So before serving those models, you should be testing them so that they are right, the numbers are right, and this will help build trust. What will happen if you don't test your DBT models? You might be serving wrong numbers to your stakeholders. Business users might complain about it and the business will lose trust in data. So that is why it is highly important that whatever you are doing, you test it and then only serve it to the stakeholders. Now the next question and the most important question is, what exactly are DBT tests? So these are actually automated checks on your resources. Oh, resources. If you have watched my previous video, then you would know what resources are. It's not just models that we can test. We can test sources. We can test snapshots. We can test models. We can test seeds. Yes, we can test all of these resources. So it's not just limited to models. That's the first thing. These actually help to validate the integrity of data. Now at a very high level, in order to define the DBT tests, what you do is you go into your test folder. How do you know which folder is your test folder? So you go into your dbt_project.yaml file and in here, whatever path you have chosen for your test, that is your test folder. Now in this test folder, you create a file. And this is again an SQL file similar to your models. So yes, we are writing select statements again here. So using the select statement, you will define the test. Then when DBT is going to run DBT test command, that's when DBT is going to run these select statements. And whatever the failed records are, they will be fetched for you. At a high level, this is how a test will function. There are different types of tests and the way you define it is a little different, but at a high level, you can understand that tests are defined in the test folder. They are just mere select statements. And when you run the DBT test, you're going to get all your failed records only. So if there are 0 failed records, then this would mean that it is passed, the test is passed. And if there are X number of failed records, then this would mean that the test has failed and you will get those failed records. Now when you are writing tests, suppose that you want to test that you know that a column cannot be null. So the way this test would work is, in your select statement, you will find all those rows where that column is null, because that's only when you will catch the failed records, and whatever the select statement will return, these will go into our failed records. So the way this works is a little bit tricky. You are saying they cannot be null. That is why you're finding those records which are null, because these are your failed records which will be given to you by DB team. This will make more sense when we will be doing the practical in the video. So please stay with me till the very end and I'm sure you will grasp the concept. Now we know that what DBT tests are and why do we need to use them. The next question is, we have to test multiple scenarios in data. There is just not one thing that we test. We test for, in a particular column, we can test for that column has unique values. There could be a different column where it is essential for us to check whether the values are null or not. There could be another column where we have to check that the values are within a specific range. So there are multiple things that we have to do. Some tests could be common for a few columns, whereas some columns might require a specific test. So here's the question. Should we write a new test every time we want to check something? That's where DBT gives us two different types of tests. So the next topic that we are going to discuss is types of DBT tests. So the first type of test is singular test and the other one is called as generic test. So generic tests, they are reusable tests and they are applied to many columns. So they are applied to many tables, which is many models, and many columns. That's why the name generic. Whereas the singular test, these are actually custom tests written for one specific scenario. You want to test a specific scenario on a column, that is why you will write this kind of test. Now you can think of generic tests like a standard health checkup. For example, blood pressure check, temperature check, heart rate check, etc. So the doctor uses these tests for every patient. Similarly, in DBT models, you can have these tests on many columns and many models. So these are general tests. And singular tests are like, specialized medical tests which are ordered for specific patients, like an MRI scan or a genetic test, etc. So these are custom and they are specific to a situation, and that is the same in DBT as well. These are written as custom SQL queries for a specific scenario. Let us dive deep into singular tests. Now singular tests are mere SQL queries, which means these are again just select statements. Now using these select statements, what you can do is you can fetch your failed records. So what you do is you go into your tests folder. In your test folder, you will create an SQL file. This is .sql file. Here you will write one select statement, and this select statement should fetch your failed records, and when it does, you will get your failed records and you will know whether your test has passed or not. If there are 0 records, it has passed. If there are n number of records, it has failed. So if you can write such a query which can fetch you these failed records, you have your singular test ready. Why are we calling this as singular? So the question is, why singular? Because these are one-off assertions. This is just one time you want to check this, and it is usable for single purpose only. You don't want this to be applied on multiple columns. It's just particular to a particular situation. So these are single purpose only. That's why we are calling this as singular. So here we have one SQL file which contains one select statement, and this will give you, this is your one data test that you have applied. Now whenever you will run this dbt test command, that is when dbt is going to execute this particular test files and then will fetch you the failed records. So always remember, you have to run the dbt test command for this to be executed. Now let us try to see a practical implementation of singular test, because that will help you better understand these. So I'm going into my Silver HR data clean model, and here we're going to check a particular scenario. Let's first run this so that we can fetch the data results over here. And if you look over here, we have two columns. Years at company, this column, and there is another column, total working years. Now if you think logically, your total working years should always be greater than or equal to your years at company. If you have worked previously to joining this particular company, then obviously your total working years would be more. But if this is your first job, then your total working years will be equal to years at company. This is logical, yeah? There are two columns, total working years and years at company. And now we know that what should always be true? These total working years should be greater than or equal to this years at company. So how should we write our test? The way we should write our test is, we have to figure out our test should be whether total working years is less than years at company. Why? Because that is the thing that will give us the failed records, where total working years is less than years at company. So this is how you need to structure your tests. You don't have to fetch the right records. Right records would be where this condition is true. We have to fetch where this condition holds true, because this will give us failed records. So always try to understand what you need to test and then plan your singular test accordingly. So for us, what I'm going to do here is, I'm going to create a test, and as I've mentioned, we have to go into our tests folder for this. So I'm going into my, let's close this. So I'm going into my test folder, and here the first test that I'm going to do is test invalid tenure. This is a simple test. I just want to show you the practicality of things. That's why I'm showing you how to write this test. You can take any particular situation that you want to test in this data set and create your own test. So let's create this test underscore invalid underscore tenure .sql, because it is a .sql file. So again, the way to do this is, if you know SQL, you know how to write this. Select star, or select if you just want to select the employee ID, whatever you want to get. In the failed records, I'm just doing select star from. And now we have to refer at our silver layer model, which is the clean model. And similar to how we were able to refer other models or refer seed files, we can use the ref keyword. So I'm going to write Jinja template here, and I'm going to say ref, and then I'm going to give here Silver HR data clean with lookup values, the model name. So we are selecting from this particular model, and now we have to write our condition to fetch failed records. Remember this. So failed records will be years at company is greater than total working years, because that's what our failed record is. So this is the condition I have written, and let's just save this. Now you know that it will not get executed until you run dbt test command. So let us go into our terminal. I'm in my dbt project folder, dbt underscore HR analytics. So now here I'm just going to run dbt test. Now as soon as you run this test, you can see that it has test invalid tenure. This is the test we are running. It is a pass because there are no records found. Now let us do one thing. Let us add a record in our staging data such that that record will fail for this particular test, which means for that record, years at company would be greater than total working years. So I'm going into my Snowflake, and I've created this insert statement. I am adding this record 100114. This is the employee number, and for them I'm saying that their total working years is 1 and years at company is 10. Let me just add it and show you. So let's see this record in staging area first. So here you can see total working years is 1 and years at company is 10. So this is the perfect example where our test will fail. So now let us first run dbt run. to build this particular model so that we have that record in the silver layer. And now I will do dbt test. And now you see here that completed with 1 error, 0 partial success and 0 warnings. And it is saying that we have got 1 result. It is saying there is 1 record that is failing. Now it is also telling you how you can find this out. The compiled code is at target, compiled, and then the way we were seeing these results for models, the same way you have to do it here as well. So you go into target, you check out compiled, then you have folders like models and test. We want to look at test and then test underscore invalid tenure.sql. So you can see that this is the compiled code generated by dbt. We were only giving reference, but dbt has generated the compiled code for us. And we can also see, if we go into run, what is the actual query the dbt has run. So I went into run and then test and then our model, and you can see that dbt has added this select clause over our query. So you can see that it is saying how many number of failures are there, how many should warn, should error. It is getting that count for us. Now the thing is, we can go to our data warehouse and figure out which record it was. So I can just go here and copy this. This is the compiled code, or you can just go to compiled code and just copy this. Either works fine. And then let's come over here and we will run this query. And now you will see that the record 100114 gets flagged to us that this is not adhering to the test that you were expecting. So here the years at company is greater than total working years, which is not what you expect. So this is how testing will help us first flag the records, and then we can see which are the flagged records. We can see these are the failed records. So I hope now you're able to connect the dots as to first we define the test in the test folder as an SQL file, and that's exactly what we did over here. You can use ref keywords, source keywords, etc., whichever you like, depending on what scenario you want to test. So this is how we have done it. And then you first build the model, because that's only when model will have that data, and then do dbt test to test this particular scenario on your data. You can choose any model that you like, could be silver, gold, bronze, anything. Now let us test another scenario. So here what I'm testing is, for our created ad column that we have, let's go back to our clean data and run it. So at the very end there is a created ad column which shows that when that employee record was created. So now what we want is, this column should not have any dates which are in future. Also we want that there is a particular date, let's say 1/1, like 1st January 2000. That is the date where we decide there should not be any created ad before this date, because that's when the company was formed. So we want to ensure the temporal integrity of data. This is what is called as temporal integrity. So let's test this. So again, I'm going to create a singular test for this. So let's go into our test folder and create a new file. I will call this test underscore temporal integrity created at. I like to be very specific with my names, because these gives me idea of what exactly is happening in the query. So I don't have to look into the queries. So I have added this particular SQL file. Now let us write the test. So for this, what we want is, we want to select star from, and again we are using the silver clean model. So I'm going to refer the silver clean, silver HR clean, HR data clean with lookup values model. And here what I want to do is, we want to flag that when the created date or created ad is greater than current date. If it is greater than current date, then we want to flag it. Or if the created ad is less than 200101. If there is any record that is in between these dates, from 1st January 2000 to current date, then it's a good record. But if they fall outside of it, those are the records which we need to flag, and that's why we have written this query. Now let us just save this. Let's go to terminal and we can again do dbt test to test this out. So here we can see that the test which has failed is this test invalid tenure. The other test is it has passed. As you can see over here, there are no records which are sitting outside of this range. So you can see how easy it is to test these scenarios. Let's do another test here. So if you look here, we have two silver layer models right now, clean and quarantine. Any row which is present in clean should not be present in quarantine, and any row which is present in quarantine should not be present in clean. So we can test this scenario as well to understand if there is any data leakage. So to do that, I'm going to create a new test for this. So let's go to test, create a new file, and I'm going to call this test underscore no overlap clean quarantine .sql. This is another great test to do so that you ensure that any records, they are not falling over in both the buckets. So it's easy, we just do select star from, and then again our Jinja templates, and then we do ref keyword. I'm going to reference the clean silver model here as C, and I'm going to join this with quarantine 1. So this one, and I'm calling this Q, and all I want is where c.employee number, because that is our unique record. So c.employee number is equal to q.employee number. This should not happen, right? Like this is the scenario that we want to flag. These are the records that we want to fetch, where the employee number is existing in both the clean layer as well as the quarantine layer, and that is why this is our test scenario. And again, to run this, we're just gonna do dbt test. We don't have, this is dbt test. We don't have any records which are present in both the columns, so this test is also going to pass, as you can see over here. So this was another great test to do with your data. Now whatever is our failed test, what we are currently doing is we are going into this compiled SQL query. So we are going into target, going into test, checking our compiled query, and then we are copying that query, going into our data warehouse and running this to see that which records have failed. Is there a way that dbt can just grab these records and put it in a table so that we just directly go into that table, query it, and understand and see all those failed records? Yes, that is possible. And the way to do this in dbt is, when you are running this dbt test command, you do store dash failures. So this is going to store failures. Now you will ask, where are these going to be stored? So dbt is going to create a schema in your Snowflake or in your data warehouse, and in that schema it will store all the failed results. Now what will be the default schema name? So the default schema name is dbt underscore test underscore underscore audit. Let's see this. So I'm just running this command, and I also want to show you something. So if you see over here, we have one fail, one error, and one pass. Now I didn't want to fix this. I wanted to show this to you as to how you can figure out these errors and what's going to happen. So let's dig deep into this. So let's first work on the failure one. We know that yes, we inserted a record which was gonna fail for test invalid tenure. So what dbt has done now is it has created, like I said, dbt test audit schema, and in that it creates the table with the same name as your test name, and it stores those failed records over there. So if I go here in our Snowflake, refresh, you can see that this dbt test audit schema is automatically created by dbt, and we can just copy this select statement and get our failed records. So let's look at that quickly. So I'm just going to run this, and when we run this, you can see that it is giving the same result, 100114, and you can see that this is the schema and this is the test that failed. So this easy it is when you're using DBT to understand your test results. Now you would be thinking that I don't want to use this schema name. Can I change it? Yes, you can absolutely change it. And if you have watched my previous video on config and properties, it should click to you that because this is schema change, we are talking about a config. And there are three places to define config: dbt_project.yaml file, a properties.yaml file in test directory, or in the test SQL file itself. For us, I'm going to define this in dbt_project.yaml file. So let's go to that particular file. Now, in similar way that we have defined models, seeds, we're going to define tests. So here I'm writing tests because that's our folder name. Then we have to write our project name. So this is dbt_HR_analytics, and then we just define our schema. So schema is, we want to call this failed records. Let's say I want to call my schema as failed records. Wherever there are tests which have failed, it should go in this particular, it should create a table for that test in this schema. Now, ignore that error part for now. We will look into that a bit later. So I'm again going to do dbt test -- store failures. We are asking dbt to store the failures. Now let's run this. And now you will see that instead of dbt_test__audit, it's going to choose the name that we have given over here. So now you can see that our failed records, they are going into this failed records schema. Let's go here and refresh to check if it has been created or not. And you can see that this particular schema got created. And we can just copy this select clause, go over here, and we can just run this. And it's going to again give us the same result. So now I have shown you how we can store the failed records, how we can change the schema of these records, and the way to know which test has failed, it is already given in the table name that it creates for you. So it's very intuitive. Now let us look at the second thing that I was flagging, this error. Now this error is actually not a failed test, it is some error in the SQL compilation. Now dbt makes it easy for us. It is giving us database error in this particular test, and it is giving us SQL compilation error, duplicate column name age. So I went into this test, and what I realized was, because these have both similar columns, when we are joining it, so it's creating duplicate columns for age because it's existing in both of them, and it's going to do the same for the other columns as well. So for this particular test, what I'm going to fetch is just the employee number. Now I'm going to save this, and now let's clear this and run our dbt test -- store failures. We are asking dbt to store the failures. And now you will see that our error is gone. It will just have one failure and two passes. So this is failure, this is pass, and this is pass. So now you know the issue, because we were joining both the tables or both the models, and both models had similar column names. That is why it was creating a problem. Now that we have fixed it, we now know that the failed records went into our failed records schema in the table called as test invalid tenure, because this is the test that failed. Another question that might be popping into your mind is, what if I run this second time? I fix the issues, I run this second time. Will dbt retain those failed records? No. dbt always deletes the previous run and adds the new run to it. So if you will fix the invalid tenure problem and then run this again, dbt will remove those records from test_invalid tenure. So test results, they will always be replaced with the latest run that has happened. Now as you can see over here, why these tests are called as singular test, because we are running a scenario specific test here. We have defined on which model this test should be applied. We have defined on which columns of this model this test should be applied. What is the output that we want. So all the information is contained over here in single select clause. And that is why we are just testing one specific scenario, which is why it is called as a singular test. I hope this makes things clear now. Last topic that I want to touch in this particular video is, what if we have to describe these tests? We have to document these tests so that anybody who's coming new into the company or who has not worked on these tests, they know what these tests are about. So we want to add descriptions about it. So where can we do it? As you can see, we have to describe the metadata about this test. We have to give a description which comes as a metadata about the test. So if you have again watched my properties and config video, if you know the answer whether this is a property or a config, please put your answer in the comments below. I would love to know. And for those of you who don't know, this is metadata about a test, and that is why it should go in a YAML file. And this YAML file we will create under the test folder. So in my test folder, I will create a new file. I'm going to call this tests schema.yaml, and here I'm going to define or provide the description or provide the metadata information about the test. So the way to do this is, I'm going to say data tests, similar to how we were saying seeds, models, sources. So this time, because it is about tests, so we are saying data underscore tests. Then we have to provide the name. So I'm providing name test invalid tenure. So this is my test name, and then we just have to provide this description for it. So description could be, this is the test to ensure that the years at company column value is always less than or equal to total working years. So here I have added this particular description. So I've explained why we are testing this and what's the logic behind it. Similarly, we can do this for the other tests as well. So let me just add those descriptions quickly over here. So now I've added all these descriptions to the data, and this will help us when we are doing the documentation, which we will be seeing in the later videos. At the end, I just want to push this to Git because we have not done that in the previous videos as well, and we have added a lot of things over here. So I'm going to do git add, and then let's just check the status, git status. So we have made changes in models, seeds, test, and we have not pushed these to GitHub. So let's do that quickly. I'm going to add git commit, and I'm going to add message added seeds, models, tests. We should have done this regularly, but that's fine. Let's just add it over here. And now I'm just going to do git push origin main. Now this is all available on my GitHub repository if you want to take a look at it over there. This video has already become too long and I don't want to stretch it any further. So I will be covering the generic tests in the next video. If you have any questions on what are these DBT tests or any questions about singular tests, then please put your questions in the comments below. I promise that I will get back to you on those questions in the comments. If you found this video helpful, then please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next one.